Marcus Chen had been salvaging space debris for 12 years, but he'd never seen anything like the massive white shape drifting through the asteroid field. His ship's sensors were going crazy, registering biosignatures mixed with metallic compounds in ways that shouldn't be possible. "What the hell is that thing?" he muttered, adjusting his ship's trajectory to get a closer look. The object was enormous, easily 3 times the size of his salvage vessel. As he approached, Marcus realized it wasn't a ship at all. It was alive. The creature's body was serpentine and graceful, with 4 powerful limbs ending in clawed appendages. Massive wings were folded against its sides, and its head was unmistakably draconic. But what made Marcus's breath catch was its color, pure white, like fresh snow against the black of space. The dragon appeared to be unconscious, drifting lifelessly through the void. Its body was covered in what looked like millions of small dark growths. Marcus had seen enough alien parasites in his salvaging career to recognize barnacle-like organisms when he saw them. These weren't just attached to the surface, they seemed to be burrowing into the creature's hide. "This is either the biggest payday of my career or the stupidest thing I've ever done," Marcus said to himself as he maneuvered his ship closer. His scanning equipment revealed that the dragon was still alive, but barely. Its life signs were weak and erratic. The barnacles were slowly draining it, feeding off its energy and biological systems. Marcus had seen similar parasitic relationships on other worlds, but never on this scale. The dragon's massive eye suddenly opened, a brilliant blue orb that seemed to pierce straight through Marcus's soul. There was intelligence there, ancient and profound. The creature was aware of his presence, studying him with the same intensity that he was studying it. Marcus felt a strange sensation in his mind. Not quite words, but something deeper. Images flashed through his consciousness. Vast star systems, incredible technologies, and a sense of desperate need. The dragon wasn't just sick. It was dying. The barnacles had been feeding on it for what felt like centuries. "You need help, don't you?" Marcus whispered, though he knew the creature couldn't hear him through the vacuum of space. The dragon's eye blinked once, slowly, and Marcus took that as confirmation. He'd salvaged everything from broken starships to alien artifacts, but he'd never tried to rescue a spacefaring dragon before. The logistics alone were staggering. The creature was far too large to fit in his ship's cargo bay, and he had no idea what kind of life support it might need. But Marcus had always been a problem solver. That's what made him good at salvaging, the ability to look at impossible situations and find creative solutions. He studied the dragon's condition more carefully, noting that while the barnacles were clearly harmful, they seemed to be keeping the creature alive in some twisted way, providing just enough oxygen and nutrients to maintain basic functions. The dragon's head turned slightly, following Marcus's ship as he circled around it. There was something almost pleading in that ancient gaze. Marcus had seen plenty of distress calls in his time, but this felt different. This wasn't just a cry for help, it was a test of humanity's character. "All right, big guy," Marcus said, making his decision. "Let's see what we can do about those hitchhikers of yours." He knew his salvage tools weren't designed for biological work, but he had some medical equipment aboard for emergencies. More importantly, he had something that most salvagers didn't, a background in xenobiology from his university days. He'd dropped out to become a salvager when the pay proved better than research, but the knowledge was still there. Marcus began documenting everything he could about the creature and its condition. If he was going to help, he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with. The dragon remained still, watching him with those incredible blue eyes as if it understood that this strange human was its only hope for survival. The barnacles were unlike anything in Marcus's databases. They seemed to be a hybrid of organic and mechanical components, suggesting they might not be naturally occurring parasites. Someone or something had created these creatures specifically to drain the dragon's energy. The question was why. As Marcus worked, he began to notice patterns in the barnacle distribution. They weren't randomly scattered across the dragon's body. They were concentrated around specific areas that his scans suggested were major energy nodes. Someone had been very deliberate about where these parasites were placed. The dragon's breathing was slow and labored, each exhale creating small clouds of vapor that immediately froze in the vacuum. Marcus realized that the creature was slowly suffocating, its massive lungs struggling to process what little oxygen the barnacles were providing. "This isn't just parasitism," Marcus said aloud, his voice echoing in his small cockpit. This is imprisonment. The dragon's eye fixed on him again, and Marcus felt that strange mental touch once more. This time the sensation was clearer, gratitude mixed with urgency. The creature knew it was running out of time, and it was placing its faith in this lone human who had stumbled across it in the vastness of space. Marcus checked his supply inventories. He had enough oxygen and nutrients to keep himself alive for another 3 weeks. But sharing with a creature this size would cut that time dramatically. He was looking at a rescue mission that could very well cost him his own life. But as he looked into those ancient, intelligent eyes, Marcus knew he couldn't just fly away. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it deserved better than dying alone in the cold emptiness of space, slowly drained by artificial parasites. Okay, Marcus said, beginning to formulate a plan. First things first, we need to get some of those barnacles off you and see what kind of shape you're really in. Marcus spent 3 hours rigging up a makeshift surgical platform using his salvage equipment. He'd never performed surgery on a creature this size, especially not in zero gravity. But his xenobiology training was coming back to him. The dragon remained perfectly still during his preparations, as if it understood that any movement might complicate the delicate work ahead. The first barnacle Marcus targeted was about the size of his fist, located near what appeared to be a major nerve cluster on the dragon's neck. He approached it carefully with his modified plasma cutter, adjusted to its lowest setting. The creature's hide was incredibly thick, but the barnacles had burrowed deep, their root systems intertwining with the dragon's nervous system. As the plasma beam made contact with the barnacle, the creature's entire body shuddered. Not from pain, Marcus realized, but from relief. The barnacle let out a high-pitched shriek that resonated through his ship's hull before dissolving into a puddle of organic sludge. Immediately, the dragon's breathing became slightly easier. 1 down, Marcus muttered. About 1 million to go. But as he worked on the second barnacle, Marcus noticed something incredible. The dragon's body was beginning to heal itself. Where he'd removed the first parasite, new tissue was already growing, healthy and white. The creature's natural regenerative abilities were far beyond anything he'd encountered before. The dragon's eye tracked his movements, and Marcus felt that mental connection growing stronger. Images began flowing into his mind more clearly now, visions of the dragon soaring through space under its own power, its wings spread wide against a backdrop of stars. It had once been magnificent, a creature of pure freedom and power. More images followed. Marcus saw flashes of a great battle. Ships that looked like nothing in human databases engaging in combat around a massive space station. The dragon had been fighting alongside other creatures of its kind, defending something precious. But they had been outnumbered, overwhelmed by an enemy that used the barnacles as weapons. They did this to you on purpose, Marcus said, his anger growing. This wasn't an accident or natural parasitism. Someone captured you and turned you into their personal battery. The mental images confirmed his suspicion. The barnacles were harvesting the dragon's natural energy and transmitting it somewhere else, a form of biological power theft that had been sustaining the creature's captors for what Marcus estimated to be decades, possibly centuries. As he removed more barnacles, Marcus began to understand the full scope of the dragon's imprisonment. The parasites weren't just draining energy, they were suppressing the creature's natural abilities. He could see places where the dragon's scales should have been luminescent, organs that should have been generating some form of exotic energy, all dimmed and constrained by the alien technology. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Some of the barnacles fought back when threatened, extending razor-sharp tendrils that tried to pierce Marcus's environmental suit. Others released clouds of toxic gas that would have killed him, if not for his ship's air filtration systems. But with each parasite removed, the dragon grew stronger. After 6 hours of continuous work, Marcus had cleared maybe 1% of the creature's body. His hands were shaking from fatigue and his air supply was running lower than he'd like, but the dragon was noticeably more alert, its massive head turning to track his movements with growing awareness. We need to speed this up, Marcus told the creature. I can't remove all of these one by one. There has to be a better way. The dragon's response came as a flood of new images. Marcus saw the creature's anatomy in incredible detail, including what appeared to be a primary control node located deep in its chest cavity. The barnacles weren't operating independently. They were part of a network, controlled by a central organism that had embedded itself near the dragon's heart. A queen, Marcus breathed. Take out the queen, and the whole system collapses. But reaching the control node would require going inside the dragon, literally entering its body through one of the wounds the barnacles had created. The idea was terrifying and probably suicidal, but Marcus could see no alternative. The creature was trusting him with this information, showing him the one vulnerability that could free it from centuries of torment. Marcus began preparing for what had to be the most insane rescue mission in human history. He gathered his smallest surgical tools and rigged up a portable life support system that would allow him to work inside the dragon's body. The creature watched his preparations with something that looked like approval. "You know this is crazy, right?" Marcus said to the dragon. "I could get lost in there or killed by your immune system or a dozen other things." The mental response was gentle but firm. The dragon understood the risks, but it also knew this was its only chance for freedom. It had been waiting for someone brave enough and skilled enough to attempt what Marcus was planning. The fact that this someone happened to be human seemed to amuse the ancient creature. As Marcus made his final preparations, he began to understand why this encounter felt so significant. Humanity was still relatively new to the galactic community, seen by many older species as primitive and reckless. But sometimes primitive and reckless were exactly what a situation required. "All right," Marcus said, checking his equipment one last time. "Let's go free you from the inside out." The dragon's massive head moved closer to Marcus's ship, and one of the larger wounds on its chest began to dilate, creating an opening just large enough for a human to enter. Marcus could see bioluminescent pathways leading inward, as if the creature was literally lighting his way to the target. Marcus sealed his environmental suit and grabbed his equipment. He was about to become probably the first human being to perform surgery from inside a living dragon, in the middle of space with no backup and no guarantee of survival. "If this works," he said to himself, "I'm definitely asking for hazard pay." Moving through the dragon's internal passages was like exploring a living cathedral. The walls pulsed with soft bioluminescence, and Marcus could feel the creature's heartbeat reverberating through his entire body. The pathways were larger than he'd expected, designed for circulation of fluids that glowed with an otherworldly blue light. The dragon's biology was unlike anything in human scientific records. Its internal structure seemed to blend organic tissue with what Marcus could only describe as biological technology. Conduits that looked like veins carried not just blood, but streams of pure energy that created patterns of light along the creature's internal walls. As he moved deeper into the dragon's body, Marcus began encountering the barnacle network more directly. Thick, root-like structures had grown throughout the creature's circulatory system, creating a secondary network that was siphoning off the energy streams. The parasitic system was so extensive that Marcus wondered how the dragon had survived at all. Following the bioluminescent pathways, Marcus made his way toward the creature's heart chamber. The journey took nearly an hour of careful navigation through passages that sometimes required him to crawl on his hands and knees. His portable life support system was working perfectly, but he could feel the weight of being inside something so massive and alien. The heart chamber, when he finally reached it, took his breath away. The dragon's heart was the size of a small room, beating with a rhythm that seemed to resonate with the fundamental forces of the universe. But wrapped around it like a cancer was the queen barnacle, a grotesque mass of organic machinery that pulsed. With stolen energy, the queen was far more sophisticated than the individual parasites Marcus had been removing. It had integrated itself so thoroughly with the dragon's cardiovascular system that removing it would require incredible precision. One wrong cut could kill the dragon instantly. Marcus studied the growth carefully, using his scanner to map its connections to the host. The queen had been here for a very long time, growing and adapting, becoming more efficient at its grim harvest. But it had also become dependent on the dragon's systems, which gave Marcus an idea. Instead of trying to cut the queen out, Marcus began targeting its control interfaces, the neural connections it used to command the barnacle network. These were smaller, more delicate structures that he could sever without causing catastrophic damage to the dragon. The first control link he cut caused a shudder throughout the entire network. Marcus could feel the dragon's relief as thousands of barnacles across its body suddenly loosened their grip. The queen barnacle writhed in response, its control systems trying to compensate for the damage. "Easy there," Marcus muttered, steadying himself as the heart chamber shook. "Let's not panic the patient." Working methodically, Marcus continued severing the neural links. Each cut weakened the queen's hold on its network and strengthened the dragon. The creature's natural healing abilities began working overtime, pushing foreign tissue out of its systems and regenerating damaged organs. But the queen wasn't giving up without a fight. As Marcus cut deeper into its control systems, the parasitic entity began releasing defensive chemicals designed to kill any threat to its existence. Marcus's environmental suit protected him from the worst of it, but he could feel the corrosive substances trying to eat through his equipment. The dragon's immune system was also fighting back now. Having recognized Marcus as a beneficial presence rather than an invader, protective cells surrounded him, creating a buffer against the queen's attacks while he worked. The cooperation between human technology and draconic biology was seamless in a way that surprised Marcus. As he severed the final control link, the queen barnacle let out a sound that was part shriek, part electronic feedback. The massive parasitic entity began to collapse in on itself, its stolen energy dissipating back into the dragon's natural systems. Throughout the creature's body, millions of individual barnacles were dying as their connection to the control network failed. Marcus felt the dragon's joy like a wave of pure emotion washing through his mind. For the first time in centuries, the creature was free to access its own power without interference. The heart chamber began glowing brighter as energy that had been suppressed for so long finally flowed freely through the dragon's systems. But the celebration was short-lived. As the queen died, it triggered some kind of emergency protocol. Marcus's scanner detected a new signal being transmitted from deep within the parasitic mass, a distress call reaching out across space to whoever had originally deployed these creatures. Oh no, Marcus realized. It's calling for backup. The implications hit him immediately. Somewhere out there were the beings who had captured and tortured this magnificent creature, and they now knew their prisoner was being freed. They would come to reclaim their stolen power source, and they would not be happy about losing it. The dragon's mental voice reached Marcus with new urgency. Images flowed into his mind showing fleets of dark ships, beings of incredible malevolence who treated other sentient creatures as nothing more than resources to be exploited. The dragon species had fought these entities before and lost. That's how it had ended up in this condition. Marcus began making his way back through the dragon's body, moving as quickly as he could while the creature's systems underwent massive changes. The passages were shifting as the dragon's body reclaimed areas that had been controlled by the barnacle network. What had been dim and constrained was now bright with renewed life. When Marcus finally emerged from the chest cavity, he was amazed by the transformation. The dragon's hide was now gleaming white, unmarked by parasites. Its eyes burned with an inner fire that spoke of vast intelligence and power restored. The creature was still weak from its long imprisonment, but it was undeniably magnificent. The dragon's head turned toward Marcus, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude flowing from the ancient mind. But beneath the gratitude was something else, a warning. The distress signal had been received. Ships were already changing course toward their location. They had perhaps 6 hours before the dragon's former captors arrived in force. "We need to get you out of here," Marcus said. Though he knew his salvage ship couldn't possibly carry something so large, the dragon's response surprised him. It didn't need to be carried. It could travel through space on its own. The barnacles had been preventing it from accessing its natural abilities, but now that they were gone, the creature was remembering what it truly was. Marcus watched in wonder as the dragon's wings began to unfold, revealing membrane structures that seemed to catch and manipulate gravitational fields. This wasn't just a biological creature, it was a living starship, evolved for travel between worlds and perhaps between dimensions. As the dragon's wings fully extended, Marcus could see energy patterns flowing through the membrane structures like living circuit boards. The creature wasn't just adapted for space travel, it was a master of it, capable of manipulating gravitational fields and dimensional barriers in ways that human science barely understood. But freedom came with immediate danger. Marcus's long-range sensors were picking up ships approaching from multiple vectors. The vessels were unlike anything in human databases, dark, angular craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with a predatory efficiency that made Marcus's skin crawl. The dragon communicated its knowledge of these hunters through shared images. The Devourers, as Marcus came to think of them, were an ancient race that had perfected the art of enslaving other species. They didn't just conquer worlds, they captured the most powerful beings they could find and used them as living power sources for their empire. How many of your people did they capture? Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer would be devastating. The mental response confirmed his fears. The dragon was possibly the last of its kind, at least in this region of the galaxy. The others had either been captured like itself or had died fighting the Devourers. The species that had once been guardians of entire star systems had been reduced to a single, imprisoned survivor. The approaching fleet consisted of 12 ships, each one designed specifically for recapturing escaped assets. Marcus could see weapon systems that were clearly meant to disable. Rather than destroy, the Devourers wanted their power source back intact. Can you fight them? Marcus asked, knowing it was probably a hopeless question. The dragon's response was complex. It could fight, yes, but it was still weak from centuries of imprisonment. In its current state, it might be able to handle 2 or 3 of the hunter ships, but 12 would be overwhelming. The creature needed time to fully recover its strength, and time was exactly what they didn't have. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. His salvage ship was fast but completely unarmed. He couldn't fight the Devourers directly, but maybe he could buy the dragon the time it needed to escape. The idea forming in his head was probably suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. Can you get to the asteroid field? Marcus asked, indicating the dense cluster of rocks where he'd originally been working. The dragon understood immediately. The asteroids would provide cover and complicate targeting for the hunter ships. More importantly, Marcus knew that field better than anyone. He'd been salvaging there for months and knew every major rock and hiding spot. Working together, they began moving toward the asteroid field. The dragon's flight was still unsteady, but it was improving rapidly as its natural systems came back online. Marcus's ship stayed close, ready to provide support or distraction as needed. The hunter fleet had detected their movement and was adjusting course to intercept. Marcus could see weapon systems powering up on the lead ships, some kind of energy net designed to entangle and subdue the dragon. The Devourers had clearly done this many times before. Almost there, Marcus muttered, watching the distance to the asteroid field shrink on his displays. The first energy net fired just as they reached the outer edge of the field. Marcus threw his ship into a desperate evasive maneuver, drawing the net away from the dragon and into a cluster of iron-rich asteroids. The net wrapped around the rocks instead, its energy discharging harmlessly into the metal. That's one, Marcus said, but 11 ships were still closing fast. The dragon was gaining strength and confidence with each passing minute. Its movements through space were becoming more fluid and natural, wings adjusting the local gravitational field to provide impossible maneuvers around the asteroids. Marcus had never seen anything so beautiful and deadly at the same time, but the Devourers were adapting too. They began firing different weapons, devices that created gravitational anomalies designed to trap the dragon regardless of its abilities. One of the anomalies caught the creature's wingtip, and Marcus felt its pain as a sharp stab in his own mind. That's it, Marcus decided. Time for the human approach to problem solving. He armed the only weapons his salvage ship had, industrial plasma cutters and demolition charges meant for breaking up large pieces of debris. They weren't designed for ship-to-ship combat, but Marcus had never been one to let design limitations stop him. Banking his ship around a massive asteroid, Marcus came up behind one of the hunter vessels and opened fire with his plasma cutters. The industrial tools weren't built for penetrating military armor, but they could cut through engine components and sensor arrays. The hunter ship suddenly found itself blind and unable to maneuver properly. The other Devourer ships immediately focused their attention on Marcus, apparently deciding that the human was now the primary threat. Energy nets and gravitational weapons began targeting his much smaller vessel, forcing him into an increasingly desperate dance around the asteroids. But Marcus's desperate attack had given the dragon the opening it needed. With several hunter ships distracted, the creature was able to focus its power on the remaining threats. What Marcus witnessed next would stay with him for the rest of his life. The dragon's roar echoed across multiple dimensions, a sound that bypassed physical hearing and struck directly at the soul. Energy coursed along its scales, building to a crescendo that made space itself seem to bend around the creature. When the dragon finally unleashed its power, it wasn't just a weapon, it was the fury of a free being striking back at its captors. The beam that erupted from the dragon's mouth wasn't made of any energy Marcus recognized. It seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, passing through normal matter while obliterating the hunter ship's exotic armor. 3 devourer vessels simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to pure energy that dissipated into the cosmic background radiation. The remaining hunter ships immediately changed tactics, no longer trying to capture but now attempting to retreat. The dragon had demonstrated power levels far beyond what they'd expected from a recently freed prisoner. Their enslaved power source had become an apex predator, and they wanted no part of the fight, but the dragon wasn't finished. Centuries of imprisonment had built up a terrible anger, and now that it was free, it intended to ensure these particular devourers would never threaten anyone again. The creature pursued the fleeing ships with implacable determination, its power growing stronger with each moment of freedom. Marcus found himself in the unique position of being humanity's first witness to a cosmic revenge story that had been centuries in the making. And somehow he'd ended up on the winning side. The battle was over in minutes, but Marcus knew the war was just beginning. The dragon had destroyed the hunter fleet completely, reducing 12 advanced warships to scattered atoms with a display of power that defied everything humans thought they knew about physics. But the devourers were an empire, and this had been just one hunting pack. As the last echoes of destructive energy faded, the dragon turned back toward Marcus's ship. The creature's mental voice reached him again, but now it carried new complexity, gratitude mixed with concern and something that might have been affection. The bond they'd formed during the rescue was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. Through their mental connection, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what they'd accomplished. The dragon wasn't just any member of its species, it was one of the eternal guardians, beings who had protected entire sectors of the galaxy before the Devourer invasion. Its freedom would send shockwaves through the empire that had held it captive, but that freedom came with responsibility. The dragon showed Marcus images of other imprisoned beings, creatures of incredible power and intelligence being slowly drained to fuel the Devourer's expansion. There was a whole network of living batteries scattered across their empire, and now that one had escaped, the others might have a chance at freedom too. You want to rescue them? Marcus realized, and the dragon's agreement was immediate and fierce. The plan that began forming in their shared consciousness was audacious even by human standards. The dragon would use its restored powers to locate other imprisoned guardians, while Marcus would provide intelligence and tactical support. His human perspective and problem-solving abilities had proven invaluable during the rescue. The dragon wanted him as a permanent partner. Marcus felt honored and terrified in equal measure. He was being invited to join what amounted to a cosmic revolution, a campaign to free enslaved beings across multiple star systems. It was the kind of adventure that most humans could only dream of. But it would also mean leaving behind everything he'd known. The dragon seemed to understand his hesitation and shared more images, glimpses of what his life could become. He saw himself working alongside beings of incredible power and wisdom, using his uniquely human approach to solve problems that had stumped civilizations for millennia. The dragon species had always valued courage and ingenuity, and Marcus had demonstrated both in abundance. What about humanity? Marcus asked. Won't they wonder what happened to me? The dragon's response was surprisingly thoughtful. Humanity was young and curious, likely to spread throughout the galaxy in the coming centuries. They would encounter the Devourers eventually, and when that happened, they would need allies and protection. By joining the Liberation Campaign, Marcus would be helping to ensure his species' future survival. Marcus looked at his salvage ship, small, practical, and utterly inadequate for the kind of mission they were discussing. But the dragon had a solution for that too. Its natural abilities included something Marcus could only think of as dimensional storage. The creature could literally carry his ship within a pocket of folded space, keeping it safe while providing him with a mobile base of operations. The demonstration was spectacular. The dragon's body began to shimmer with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Space around Marcus's ship folded in on itself, and suddenly he was inside what appeared to be a vast hangar bay that existed within the dragon's body. The physics involved were completely beyond human understanding, but the practical result was exactly what they needed. From inside his new base, Marcus could monitor the dragon's external sensors and communicate with the creature's consciousness directly. He had access to databases that contained star charts spanning most of the galaxy, along with detailed information about Devourer, operations that had been gathered over centuries of observation. The first target was clear from the intelligence data, a prison, facility 3 systems away where the Devourers were holding what appeared to be a guardian, specialized in temporal manipulation. The creature had been captured while trying to use its time-shifting abilities to prevent a planetary genocide. Its rescue would be both a moral imperative and a strategic advantage, but reaching the prison would require crossing through Devourer space, and Marcus's rescue of the dragon hadn't gone unnoticed. Intelligence reports showed increased patrols and new security measures being implemented across their territory. The Empire was taking the escape seriously. They're scared, Marcus realized as he studied the patrol patterns. They know that losing you is just the beginning. The dragon's agreement came with grim satisfaction. The Devourers had built their empire on the assumption that their victims would remain helpless. The idea that their prisoners might fight back, or worse, that someone might help them fight back, was terrifying to beings who saw other species as nothing more than resources. Marcus began developing strategies for the rescue mission, drawing on his experience with salvage operations and his growing understanding of Devourer technology. The prison facility was heavily defended, but it was also old and hadn't been upgraded to account for the possibility of a Guardian-level assault. The dragon's powers would be essential for breaching the facility's defenses, but Marcus's human approach to problem-solving would be equally important. He could see weaknesses in the prison design that the Devourers had overlooked, vulnerabilities that could be exploited with the right combination of technology and tactics. As they traveled toward their first target, Marcus found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. The mental connection with the dragon was expanding his consciousness, giving him access to perspectives and knowledge that no human had ever possessed. He was becoming something new, not quite human anymore, but not entirely other either. The transformation was gradual and painless, but profound. Marcus could feel his mind expanding to accommodate concepts that human language didn't have words for. He was learning to think in multiple dimensions, to perceive time as a flowing river rather than a straight line, to understand the deep connections that linked all life in the galaxy. But he remained fundamentally human in his approach to problems, and that humanity was proving to be his greatest strength. Where other species might see impossible challenges, Marcus saw puzzles to be solved. Where ancient wisdom might counsel patience, human stubbornness demanded immediate action. The dragon found this perspective refreshing and powerful. Its species had become too contemplative over the millennia, too willing to accept defeat when faced with overwhelming odds. Marcus's arrival had reminded it that sometimes the best response to impossible odds was to ignore them entirely and find a creative solution. Together, they were becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. A partnership between human ingenuity and guardian power that promised to reshape the balance of forces throughout known space. The prison facility hung in the void like a cancerous growth against the stars. Marcus studied it through the dragon's sensors, noting the layered defenses that surrounded the central detention complex. Energy barriers, automated weapon platforms, and patrol ships created overlapping fields of protection that would challenge even a fully powered guardian. But Marcus wasn't thinking like a guardian. He was thinking like a salvager, who'd spent years finding ways into places that were supposedly impossible to breach. The Devourers had built their prison assuming they'd face direct assault. They hadn't planned for someone who would approach the problem from an entirely different angle. Those power conduits, Marcus pointed out, highlighting a series of barely visible energy lines that fed the prison's defensive systems. They're running through that asteroid cluster to mask their signatures. If we could disrupt them at the source. The dragon's agreement came with admiration for the human perspective. The facility's designers had hidden the power sources to protect them from conventional attack. But they'd created a vulnerability that someone with salvaging experience could exploit. Working together, they developed a plan that combined stealth, precision, and the kind of creative problem-solving that had made humanity notorious throughout known space. Marcus would use his ship's salvage equipment to disable the power grid, while the dragon created a dimensional distortion to mask their approach. The infiltration went smoothly at first. Marcus's ship, carried within the dragon's pocket dimension, emerged near the asteroid cluster housing the power sources. His industrial plasma cutters made short work of the main conduits, while the dragon's presence remained undetected by the facility's sensors. As the power grid began failing, Marcus got his first clear look at what the Devourers had been holding prisoner. The temporal guardian was massive even by dragon standards, its body twisted through multiple time streams in ways that hurt to perceive directly. The creature existed in several moments simultaneously. Its consciousness spread across past and future in an attempt to maintain sanity during its imprisonment. "How long has it been trapped like that?" Marcus asked, horrified by the implications. The dragon's response came with deep sorrow. The temporal guardian had been captured during the early days of the Devourer expansion, possibly centuries before the dragon's own imprisonment. It had been experiencing its torment across multiple timelines simultaneously, unable to escape because every possible future had been calculated and blocked by its captors. But the Devourers hadn't calculated for human intervention. Marcus represented a variable that existed outside their predictive models, a chaotic element that the temporal guardian might be able to use to break free from its temporal prison. As the facility's defenses began failing, alarms started sounding throughout the complex. The Devourers realized they were under attack, but they still couldn't locate the source. Marcus's ship remained hidden within the dragon's pocket dimension while his partner prepared to make their presence known in the most dramatic way possible. The dragon's emergence into normal space near the prison facility was like watching a star being born. Energy cascaded along its scales as it revealed its true power for the first time since its imprisonment. The creature's roar echoed across multiple dimensions, a sound of pure defiance that shattered several of the facility's energy barriers through resonance alone. The prison's automated defenses immediately focused on the dragon, but they'd been designed to contain prisoners, not repel Guardian-level attacks. Weapons that were meant to subdue and capture proved inadequate against a being that had spent centuries building up fury at its captors. Marcus watched in awe as the dragon systematically dismantled the facility's exterior defenses. Energy beams that should have been able to level mountains simply dispersed against the creature's scales. Force fields designed to contain impossible energies crumpled, like paper before the Guardian's dimensional manipulation abilities. But the real breakthrough came when the dragon's attack reached the temporal guardian's prison. The moment the containment field began failing, time around the facility started behaving strangely. Marcus saw the same explosions happening multiple times, patrol ships that existed in past and future simultaneously, and sections of the prison that aged decades in seconds. The temporal guardian was using the chaos of the rescue to break free from its chronological constraints. As its power returned, the creature began collapsing the multiple timelines it had been spread across, concentrating its consciousness back into a single moment. The reunion between the two guardians was beyond human comprehension. Marcus felt echoes of emotions that had no equivalent in human experience: joy that spanned millennia, relief measured in cosmic cycles, and a shared determination that burned with the fury of dying stars. But their celebration was interrupted by the arrival of a Devourer battle fleet. This wasn't another hunting pack, it was a full military response designed to recapture both Guardians and eliminate the unknown factor that had made their escape possible. Marcus found himself facing enemy ships that dwarfed anything he'd seen before. The flagship alone was larger than most human space stations, its hull bristling with weapons designed to subdue beings of immense power. Smaller vessels spread out in formations that spoke of thousands of years of military experience. "Okay," Marcus said to his partners. "This is where we find out if friendship really can overcome superior firepower." The battle that followed would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. Two newly freed Guardians, supported by one determined human, faced an entire Devourer fleet in combat that bent the laws of physics and occasionally broke them entirely. The temporal Guardian's abilities proved devastating against an enemy that relied on predictive algorithms. Battle plans that had been calculated with perfect precision suddenly became useless as the creature began manipulating the flow of time around individual ships, aging their hulls to scrap metal or reversing their weapon charges back to raw energy. Meanwhile, the dragon had discovered that centuries of forced energy production had actually increased its natural power levels. The creature was now capable of feats that would have been impossible before its imprisonment. Gravitational fields bent at its will, creating weapon effects that turned the Devourer's own mass against them. Marcus contributed by doing what humans did best, thinking outside the box and finding completely unexpected solutions to impossible problems. When the enemy fleet's flagship threatened to overwhelm his partners with its concentrated firepower, Marcus used his salvage ship's tractor beam to grab a nearby asteroid and throw it into the vessel's main weapon array. The technique shouldn't have worked against military-grade armor, but Marcus had noticed that the Devourer ships were designed with certain assumptions about how their enemies would behave. They weren't built to handle someone who would use industrial equipment in combat, or who would treat asteroids as improvised ammunition. As the battle raged, Marcus began to understand something profound about the nature of the conflict. The Devourers weren't just another aggressive species. They represented a philosophy that saw the universe as a resource to be consumed. They couldn't comprehend beings who would risk everything for friendship, or who would fight impossible odds simply because it was the right thing to do. That incomprehension was their greatest weakness, and it would ultimately prove to be their downfall. The Devourer fleet's destruction marked more than just a military victory. It was the beginning of a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. As the last enemy ship crumpled under the combined assault of Guardian power and human ingenuity, Marcus felt the mental bond between him and his partners expand to include something larger. Across Devourer space, other imprisoned Guardians were awakening. The defeat of a major battle fleet had sent shockwaves through the Empire's command structure, causing security protocols to malfunction and containment systems to weaken. For the first time in centuries, the captives could sense each other's presence and coordinate their escape attempts. The Temporal Guardian's abilities proved crucial in this awakening. By manipulating time streams, it could communicate simultaneously with beings imprisoned across vast distances, sharing tactical information and providing the precise timing needed for coordinated breakouts. Marcus watched in amazement as his scanner displays lit up with new signatures, dozens of powerful beings emerging from hidden prisons throughout the sector. Each rescue created a cascade effect, freeing more Guardians who could then assist in liberating others. What had started as a desperate mission to save one creature had become a galactic uprising. But the Devourers weren't giving up without a fight. Intelligence reports showed massive military buildup around their core systems, and new weapons designed specifically to counter Guardian abilities were being rushed into production. The Empire was preparing for total war rather than accept the loss of their living power sources. They'd rather destroy the galaxy than lose control of it, Marcus realized, studying the intercepted communications that painted a picture of desperate ruthlessness. The dragon's response carried grim determination. The Devourers had made their choice, and now the Guardians would make theirs. But this wouldn't be a war fought with conventional weapons or traditional tactics. It would be a campaign to free every enslaved being in the galaxy, supported by the one factor the enemy couldn't predict or counter: human creativity. Over the following months, Marcus found himself serving as both tactical advisor and philosophical guide to a growing alliance of rescued Guardians. His human perspective proved invaluable in developing strategies that the ancient beings might never have considered. Where they saw insurmountable obstacles, Marcus saw engineering challenges. Where they contemplated the complexities of cosmic justice, Marcus focused on the practical steps needed to save lives. The rescue missions became increasingly sophisticated as the team grew. Each freed Guardian brought unique abilities and knowledge, creating a force that could operate across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They could manipulate time, space, energy, and matter in ways that made conventional military thinking obsolete. But Marcus's greatest contribution wasn't tactical, it was inspirational. His willingness to risk everything for a creature he'd just met resonated with beings who had begun to lose hope after centuries of imprisonment. The human concept of friendship based on choice rather than kinship was revolutionary to species that had always organized themselves around ancient hierarchies. The War reached its climax when the Alliance discovered the location of the Devourer home system, a massive construct built around a dying star, powered by the life force of thousands of enslaved beings from across the galaxy. The facility was so heavily defended that even the assembled Guardians couldn't breach it through conventional assault. That's when Marcus proposed the most audacious plan in galactic history. Instead of attacking the fortress, they would rescue it. Using the combined abilities of all freed Guardians, they would relocate the entire structure to a safe location where the captives could be freed without risking their lives in a battle. The physics involved were staggering. Moving an artificial construct the size of a small solar system required manipulating fundamental forces on a scale that approached the divine. But Marcus had learned to think in cosmic terms during his partnership with the dragon, and he could see how the seemingly impossible could be achieved through careful coordination. The operation took 3 days and required every Guardian working in perfect synchronization. Time was stretched and compressed to allow for precise positioning. Gravitational fields were woven into a transportation matrix that could support the massive structure. Dimensional barriers were carefully folded to create a pathway through space-time itself. When the dust settled, the Devourer fortress hung in orbit around a peaceful star system, its defensive systems neutralized and its prison facilities exposed. The rescue that followed was a celebration that lasted for weeks as beings who had been captive for millennia finally tasted freedom. The Devourers themselves faced a choice, reform, or face the collective justice of their former victims. Most chose exile to distant reaches of the galaxy, their empire collapsing as their captive power sources disappeared. A few attempted to continue their predatory ways, but they found themselves facing an alliance that had learned to counter their every strategy. Marcus stood on the observation deck of his expanded ship, watching as the last group of rescued prisoners prepared to return to their homeworlds. The dragon floated nearby, its scales gleaming with health and contentment. The creature had grown even more magnificent since its rescue, power and joy radiating from its massive form. Was it worth it? Marcus asked, thinking of the year that had passed since he'd first encountered the barnacle-covered dragon, drifting helplessly through space. The response came not just from his draconic partner, but from every Guardian in the Alliance, a chorus of gratitude and determination that spoke of friendship forged in the crucible of shared struggle. They had saved not just themselves, but an entire philosophy of cooperation and mutual support that would guide the galaxy for generations to come. As human exploration ships began encountering the newly liberated systems, they found a galaxy transformed. The fear and oppression that had characterized interstellar relations for millennia was giving way to curiosity and collaboration. The story of the human who had befriended a dragon and sparked a cosmic revolution became legend, inspiring both species to reach beyond their limitations. Marcus had started his journey as a simple salvager, looking for profitable debris. He ended it as something unprecedented, a bridge between human ambition and cosmic wisdom, proof that sometimes the most important treasures aren't found in the wreckage of the past, but in the friendships forged while building a better future. The dragon's mental voice reached him one final time, carrying warmth and eternal gratitude. In saving one creature, Marcus had saved them all. And in being saved, the Guardians had learned that the universe's greatest power wasn't energy or technology, but the simple human belief that everyone deserved a chance at freedom. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be.